Welcome to State Lobbying Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we delve into the careers and personal life stories of some of the best and the brightest state government relations experts. I'm your host, Deepak, CEO of Legistracker. My next guest is Sarah Bales, a lobbyist working for Brubaker Associates in North Carolina. Sarah grew up in the suburbs of Chicago until the age of 12 and then moved to Clayton, North Carolina with her family. An avid reader, Sarah always wanted to be a lawyer. What then sparked her interest to become a lobbyist? What advice would she give to others? We hear Sarah's experience in this episode. Hey Sarah, thank you so much for joining the show. I know I gave you a very short notice and you accepted the invitation. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So typically what I ask my guests is, I ask them to give us a brief background as to where did you grow up and how was your childhood? And then we can get into the more of the career side of it. So can you just explain for our listeners, where did you grow up and how was your childhood?
Yeah, so I am actually a Yankee, even though you can't tell by my voice. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. And my parents moved down to North Carolina when I was 12 years old for a job that was my mom's, and she worked for a speaker company, a speaker manufacturer, and moved down to Clayton, North Carolina, which is a suburb of Raleigh, a little bedroom community. It's much bigger than it was when I moved there 20 years ago. My dad was a police officer back in Chicago and actually ended up working for the Wake County school system and their security services. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a kind of traditional small southern town as a girl from the Midwest. So, the first couple of years were a big transition. But I had a younger sister who's 3 years younger than me. Actually works for our lobbying firm now. So come full circle. But, great. Clayton was a great little small town. Took about a year to get kind of used to. It's a big transition, but made a lot of friends. Actually, I'm still really close friends with a group of 5 girls, 6 including myself, that I met that first year when I moved to Clayton. And a bunch of us ended up being roommates in college. And I actually, that was the baby shower. I told you we had to reschedule. The baby shower I was at was one of those girls I met when I was 13 years old.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. And during your school and high school, was there any favorite subject or course? I mean, is there anything which you were particularly inclined towards politics and the lobbying side of the world, or were you completely not at all in that direction at all?
Yeah, it's so subjects wise, I was an avid reader, so I always loved English and literature, but I was super involved in student government. And we actually had a local organization called the Clayton Youth Council, which essentially was kind of a volunteer organization. And I ended up kind of working my way up to the state youth council and became I guess I was the secretary of the state youth council. So it's all the youth councils throughout the state, and you run for election. That was my senior year of high school. So I did Girls State, which is kind of mock government. You go to Catawba College, or did back then. I'm not sure where they hold it now, but you go to Girls Catawba College and you do mock governance. So you write your own laws, you hold elections and vote for people for office. And funny enough, my husband, who's also a lobbyist now and has been in politics probably since college, also did student government and went to Boys State. And it's just really funny. We never really, we did all these things on a statewide level, but we never met each other until college. So I wasn't per se my subject matter in school, like politics and government was never my favorite, but I always had kind of a knack or a love for politics on a much smaller level.
That is very interesting. And do you think that experience you had during your high school has had any impact in the current work you're doing? And do you suggest that someone who wants to get into lobbying should be involved in some sort of this youth organizations when they were back in high school?
Yeah, I think it definitely led the path to my career. That kind of led to my love of politics. And I fell into politics because I wanted to be a lawyer. So, 12 years old watching Law and Order, I thought I wanted to go in a courtroom and be a prosecutor. And when you're an undergrad, the school I went to, NC State, you don't have a pre-law option. So kind of politics and government is the kind of the next closest thing, or what I thought was the next closest thing, which the study of law and the study of government are two very, very different things. There's a lot of overlap, but they're definitely not the same. Particular at NC State, and when I was a junior in one of my political seminar classes, actually, I heard a pretty prominent state lobbyist came and spoke to our class. And when I heard him talk, that really kind of like made me reconsider being a lawyer and maybe going into lobbying, but not knowing much about lobbying. I was already kind of on the track to go to law school. So I stuck with it and got a law degree, but ended up just getting really lucky and finding an opportunity that I didn't think I was going to have right after graduating law school.
Got it. I saw in your career and your bio that so after high school, you started working first, right? I mean, as an assistant marketing director, is that right?
Yeah, so I worked all through high school, college, and law school, even though I went straight through. So in my high school years, the house that I lived in actually backed up to a real estate development company. And so I helped a little bit in the summers, kind of making copies and doing things like that. And then my freshman year of college, they needed some extra help and kind of doing administrative and secretarial work, but eventually became the assistant marketing director for that development company. So it just kind of was my side hustle, I guess. And then I went on to get my real estate license because of that, and sold some houses, and that was my college job.
Interesting. So you were working for that real estate development company, and on the side, you went to get your graduate degree, right? In NC State University. Is that right?
Yeah. So, well, school was my primary focus. So I was getting a bachelor in political science at NC State. And then I would come back home to Clayton sometimes 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes the weekends, and work to make extra money to pay to go to school.
Interesting. So school was there, and then on the side you were doing this, and being an assistant marketing director, and then getting a real estate license, brokerage license. Did that help you in who you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got my real estate license at a very interesting time. So the 2 years that I really kind of truly practiced as a real estate agent were 2006 and 2007, which coincidentally were right before the market crashed,
Uh-huh.
and the real estate bubble really burst. So I was very much privy to kind of the practices, and got really at a young age kind of firsthand experience about why we ended up where we did. But I think it was really beneficial because while NC State and college, it's such a wonderful education. I had great experiences, and I learned so much that helps me in my job now. But working as a real estate agent at 19 and 20 years old, you have to kind of grow up fast, and you have to be kind of quick on your feet. You have to be able to engage and talk with people. That's the side of that job that I think really helped helped me become a good lobbyist.
Mhm. And I also see right in between that time period, you also were an office assistant at Williams Mullen. What was that about?
Yeah. So when the market kind of crashed and the real estate business was no longer necessarily lucrative, I kept my real estate license, but I still, at the end of the day, wanted to go to law school. I thought, I might kind of switch gears and do real estate law, but that just given my experience as a real estate agent. But I kind of rethought that, or thought that could still be an option. And wanting to go to law school, I figured I might as well work at a law firm. So at the time, I worked at what was Mop and Taylor, now is Williams Mullen, kind of as they called them gophers. So we would run errands. We'd go file documents at the courthouse. We'd we'd go take paperwork to other law firms. Sometimes we'd just go run out and get lunch for the attorneys. So it was a fun experience because you got to see meet a lot of different lawyers and see different areas of the law, and also just kind of see how a traditional law office works.
And how did you get that job? Was it just directly looking at their website and applying for a job, or was it through a referral?
It was my eighth grade teacher also lived in our neighborhood and was a former neighbor, and his wife was the hiring manager at that law firm. I think we were just maybe out on a walk in the neighborhood and was talking to her. And he had been one of my favorite teachers and actually my basketball coach in eighth grade too. And she just said they were looking for college students to kind of be office assistants, gophers. And I said that sounded really interesting. And she knew I wanted to go to law school. So I went and took the opportunity.
That's pretty cool. And this was before you joined the law school. And do you recommend, like, if anyone wants to get into law school, do you think they should like join such a position, like a job assistant for anything, helping for errands for the lawyers and learn what they are doing? Do you think that helps?
Absolutely. I say to anybody now, after having gone, which I had a wonderful law school career, and I'm very glad I went. I don't traditionally practice a lot of law and as a lobbyist. So for anybody who wants to go to law school, and I know a lot of folks in this field tend to be lawyers, but I would say absolutely go shadow a lawyer, go intern at a law office, even if it's the small kind of solo shop. I've interned at a big law firm, a traditional law firm, and I've interned with a 2-man kind of smaller shop. And I think you really need to see what practicing law is before you go to law school. I'd highly recommend it, even if you don't get paid.
Yes, I agree. And tell us a little bit about your law school degree at UNC. And was there any specific course you were interested in, which you felt like this was something I want to pursue further, or was it like a general law degree?
So you can get kind of LLMs. You can kind of specify in an area of law that's traditionally an extra additional education, a couple of additional years, but traditionally kind of law degrees are relatively general. You could take classes in areas that you're interested in. Given the background I had in real estate, I really thought I'd end up going into real estate law, but realistically with where the economy was at the time, I just didn't know if that was kind of a good career choice. So I kept my mind pretty open as to what I wanted to do when I practiced law. So I took, your first year, you take kind of a set kind of course load that's required of everybody. And then in your second and your third year, you get to choose kind of elective classes and areas that you're interested in. So I tended towards real estate, tax law, and I also participated in moot court, which is kind of mock trials. I learned very quickly that I did not want to spend time in a courtroom, which is really funny now looking back on it. It just made me really nervous to be in large groups of people, and just the kind of adversarial nature of the courtroom wasn't something I was super interested in. So I took a lot in kind of tax and business focused courses, and I thought you'd probably end up doing something in kind of a transactional attorney, maybe with a little bit of real estate. But I really wasn't super sure by the time I was a 3L and before I got my interview with my current employer. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do when I graduated.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, looking back, going to the law, getting a law degree was pretty handy for you right now in your lobbying career?
Yeah, I really do. Like I said, I wouldn't tell everybody who wants to be a lobbyist to go to law school. I think you really should have an interest in practicing some law, but I'm really, really glad that I did it because I think you kind of gain an understanding of the law and how to read the law and the background on kind of how laws are made and then how they're implemented and then kind of judicial opinions. I think it's really helpful. And I think when it came to my first year as a lobbyist, I think I did have a little bit more of a leg up just because I had kind of a base level. And I had never done politics before, like on a traditional sense. I did student government, but I had never been involved in political campaigns on any level. So that part was new. Studied it, but studying it in undergrad and going to law school is very different than the stuff that you deal with on the ground.
Oh, is it? I mean, how is it different?
Um, you know, it's kind of like any education. It's very theoretical when
Oh,
you're learning about it in college, and when you're in the middle of it, you pay a lot more attention to who's running and what's going on with campaigns, and also politics kind of in the traditional sense of like elections is also something very different than actually like the political system and the legislature. Like they're, you know, they're obviously related. You got to get elected to go to the to pass laws in the legislature, but they're kind of two different systems, you know. So when you're kind of in political world and running campaign, that's very different than being a lobbyist and working at the legislature.
so if someone had to a degree, like let's say in bachelor's or like even in the master's, what kind of a degree would you suggest for them to be a better lobbyist?
You know, I mean, I think you can do anything. You can lobby in any area of policy that you're interested in. So if you get a chemistry degree, there's all sorts of things you can do in the lobbying world based on kind of like in science in the sciences, and maybe you go work for someone like DuPont and lobby for them, and having that background is really helpful. I think you find what you're interested in, and you can lobby on just about anything.
During this law degree, I've seen like there are a lot of brief stints you did. You were working as a legal intern, as a research fellow, and then you are also doing accounts payable at SMT Inc. Can you briefly describe what those experiences were for?
Yeah, so the more traditional kind of the legal intern at the real estate commission, and for the small law firm that I worked for, and the policy fellow at the Coastal Policy Institute. Those are all very kind of traditional law school jobs. You traditionally will get a kind of either a clerkship or a job in the summer, an internship in the summer when school break, and those are, you know, sometimes paid, sometimes not, and they're kind of made to, you know, there's twofold. One is to get experience and start kind of real world practicing, and the second is if you find a job you like, and you're lucky enough to get a clerkship either with a judge or at a law firm or some other organization, you may end up going to work there when you graduate. It's kind of a trial run for you and the employer. The accounts payable, that was just to pay the bills. I didn't want to have a lot of student loan debt, and SMT is actually an organization that my mother's the president and part owner of. It's a sheet metal fabrication company, and I worked off and on there just for side jobs probably since I was 16, and it would either be entering in bills in the accounts payable department, or going on the paint line and helping tape and mask, or going back into shipping and packaging up and kitting parts. Like that was just extra money because anything that I made while I was there, I didn't have to take out in the form of student loans.
Very smart. Typically, when someone graduates with a law degree, I'm pretty sure the bill is pretty hefty. So I applaud you for that.
I have friends that took out loans for undergrad and law school, and come out owing almost $200,000. And depending on the type of job you get in the job market, you know, that's really hard to pay back in a short period of time.
I agree. So if someone out there is listening to this, and let's say if they are getting a law school degree and they want to get into lobbying, what would be a good position they should get? So that way they get their feet wet in lobbying and also be able to pay their bills.
I would say, and I've actually run into a lot of folks that do this. I would say getting a job as either a policy intern at the legislature or in the governor's office, or working as a legislative assistant if you're in some sort of flex program. Actually working on the inside would be really beneficial, because you can organically build those relationships and gain real world experience. It's really hard to just kind of, and I did this, but I got really lucky. It's really hard to just jump into lobbying, because so much of it is built on relationships and who you know, and getting people to trust you. And, you know, the other part is becoming subject matter expert. So if you're a contract lobbyist, relationships are the name of the game. If you're an in-house lobbyist, a lot of times it's subject matter expertise. And you can get both of those by working as either an intern or as an assistant of some sort, or as policy advisor. at the legislature or governor's office or agency somewhere like DEQ or the Department of Revenue. There's lots of opportunities for those types of jobs during law school.
And now let's say you graduated, and then how did you, now you're a Brubaker Associate. So after you graduated, so this is your first position as a contract lobbyist, am I right?
Yep. And my path, I got really, really lucky, and there was a lot of fate involved. So I don't know if my path is the best explanation, but I had just graduated. I was working at a small law firm as kind of an intern and a paid intern. And then I also took another position at a document review firm in Charlotte. So I was working remotely for that law office and then working in Charlotte during the week and coming home back to Raleigh on the weekends. And it was kind of a grind, but I didn't have an offer lined up yet. So I wanted to continue to be able to make money while I was waiting on my bar exam results to come in October. So that summer I was kind of hustling and working in Charlotte and Raleigh. And I had essentially 2 jobs while I waited for my bar results. And I knew I wasn't going to stay at the document review firm because that's just kind of a shorter term position. But the law firm, it appeared they were probably going to offer me a position to come on later that year once they found out that I passed the bar. And I liked it there, but I wasn't quite sure if that was going to be the best fit for me. And it just happened that I was coming back from Charlotte, driving home in 5 p.m. Charlotte traffic, still in my suit. And I had sent my resume out to several places. I cast a pretty wide net. And one of those I had found through a colleague of my husband was Harold Brubaker, who was a former legislator. He had served in the General Assembly for 37 years. And during that time served as both Speaker of the House and as the senior budget writer, as well as chairman of various committees, and was well loved by everybody that I had ever talked to. He had retired and was going to start a lobbying shop. And a colleague of my husband's, who he was running political campaigns at the time, connected us and said he's looking for a young attorney to kind of help him start this firm. You need somebody to be able to do contract and compliance work and, tell him what the bounds of what he can and cannot do. So I got a phone call on the drive home from Charlotte, and Speaker Brubaker had seen my resume and asked if I was available to come talk anytime soon. And I said, well, coincidentally, I'm actually driving from Charlotte back to Raleigh. You're the halfway point. I could come by this afternoon. And he said, yep, that's great. Come to my house. So he gave me his address. I went and he interviewed me in his office, in his study, in his house, and kind of told me a little bit about plans to start the lobbying firm with his son, Jonathan, and we really hit it off, and he ended up offering me the position right there and then. So I immediately quit that Charlotte job, so I didn't have to do that drive anymore, and let the law firm know that had made me an offer as well, know my plans. And 2 months later, we started Brubaker Associates, or restarted, and I helped start Brubaker Associates, and I have been there ever since.
Very awesome. Very cool to know this. And this was back in 2013, am I right?
2013.
And since then, have you guys added any more personnel to your company, or are you just the 3 of you still in that company?
No, so in February, so we started in 2012, late 2012, and 2013 was our first session. January, that was a long session. It was kind of a big year of change there. For the first time, I think since Reconstruction, there was a Republican trifecta in the governor's office and the Senate and the House. So I think the other stat was like 2/3 of the legislators were new that session. So we were a new firm. There were a lot of new legislators, and a new governor, and kind of a new way of doing business. So it was a good time to start, just because we were learning and starting, and so were a lot of these legislators and a lot of these agency heads. So we were able to kind of start off on a fresh slate. So in February of that year, we brought on John Del Giorno, who was worked in the pharmaceutical industry and had run an organization's federal and state government affairs for about 35 years in-house. So he came on board and really kind of brought in the healthcare chop. And then, we've had iterations of interns and some help over the years. But this past year, actually, back in last March, I believe it was, my younger sister, who's also an attorney, decided to come on board. We had been looking for another associate, and she just by happen chance had come back to Raleigh and was working in litigation and was kind of getting a little burnt out. And she had interned for us back when we started, when she was in law school in 2013. And it just kind of all came together at the right time. So she came on board last year, and it's been a really good fit. And we like to say Brubaker Associates, we keep it in the family. So we've got a pair of sisters and a father and a son all on the team. And then my husband's a lobbyist as well. And we've got a couple clients together. So usually when when we have those 2 or 3 client meetings, the majority of people around the table are related to each other.
Very cool. And what kind of what kind of clients do you have in what kinds of industries?
Yeah, so we're contract lobbyists. It runs the gamut. We've represented kind of more traditional interest groups that are not necessarily businesses in the past, and the majority of our clients are business clients. We have clients in healthcare, in pharma, technology. It really runs the gamut. There's kind of two, as a contract, there's kind of two models. You're either kind of a hired gun for a larger organization that already has kind of an internal lobbyist that usually does all the quarterbacking and kind of pulls you in when needed for different projects and as directed. And then other clients, you're their only lobbyist. So you kind of help that client develop their government affairs strategy from the ground up and then execute it. So we do both, and they both present their own challenges. And I like both options. Sometimes it's nice not to have to be the decision maker when you're working for the bigger organizations, but on the same token, when you're able to execute a strategy from A to Z, it's very satisfying.
And when you said back in 2013, a new set of legislators got introduced, are they the same set of legislators even now, or do they keep changing?
So our General Assembly, both House and Senate, serve 2-year terms. So they are running for election every 2 years. So back kind of in that freshman class of 2013, there's still quite a few folks that were there that are still in the GA, but there's a lot of turnover. It's a citizen legislature, so this isn't their full-time job. So I think one of the longest serving members has probably been there 20 or 30 years, but then you'll have somebody that maybe serves a term and they either decide not to run for reelection or they get defeated. So I'd say there's at least a handful of folk that were there in 2013 that remain. I couldn't tell you the number though, maybe about a quarter.
And how do you maintain these relationships with all these legislators? They must be at least in hundreds, am I right?
Yeah, so there's 170, 120 in the House and 50 in the Senate. And it's just through getting to know people. It's either traditional meetings in their office, and you earn their respect by being available to answer questions and providing information and being a trustworthy source. And like I said, these are citizen legislatures, and there's a lot of turnaround. So sometimes they rely on lobbyists to kind of give them a little bit of the lay of the land because they just don't have time to absorb everything and become a subject matter expert on every piece of legislation. And then, there's more organic opportunities. You go have dinner with a legislator. You can't pay for it, but you can go grab a meal together. And there's legislative conferences that you attend that you get to know each other. And then there's the traditional kind of fundraiser circuit where you get to know folks. So it's like any other career. You get to know people kind of both in a traditional sense and meetings and working side by side on things, and then also kind of on that the social level.
And now let's say if you had to put a magnifying glass in the entire career you had, can you tell what would be the one key skill which you think every lobbyist should possess?
I would say, I don't even know if it's a skill, but it's essential. You have to be trustworthy. You have to tell the truth. If a legislator can't rely on you, you're not going to be able to change their mind on voting on a piece of legislation or influence a piece of legislation. So you've got to, in lobbying, really all you have is your word. So being trustworthy and telling the truth, I mean, that's hands down the most important. I guess it's not a skill, but it's absolutely essential.
And in order to stay on top of things at the General Assembly or in politics, are there any special pieces of tools do you use, like any media? What kind of websites do you read? What kind of media do you follow?
Yeah, so the traditional kind of local papers, we have a news tracking service. You do a lot on social media, Twitter. If you're not at the legislature, Twitter can be your best friend to find out what is going on with the legislature. And then also kind of attending the committee meetings or sessions, either in person or remotely, actually being there in the building when the committee meetings and sessions are happening to be able to monitor that. But just again, kind of traditional news sources for the most part. And like I said, Twitter's my best friend when I'm not in the building.
And now let's say if you had to look towards the future, can you tell us, like, let's say in 5 or 10 years down the road, where do you want to see yourself?
I really like where I'm at. When we first started, I wasn't sure if contract lobbying was what I liked, but I really enjoy kind of the pace. I love being able to do a deep dive on things, but not necessarily have to spend all day every day in the same subject area. You meet so many people, you learn a lot in contract lobbying. So 5 or 10 years from now, I would like to still either be working or have my own contract lobbying firm.
And as closing remarks, do you have, I know you did mention about being trustworthy, but do you have any piece of advice you would like to tell the upcoming lobbyists?
Yeah, I'd say, I guess the only thing I probably didn't touch on is build relationships with other lobbyists. So the job is about influencing and working with legislators and government officials, but I can't tell you how many times I was able to find something out because another lobbyist gave me a heads up, or how I was able to prevent conflict or bill crashing and burning because I was able to talk and work with another lobbyist. So networking and making friends with other lobbyists is hands down one of the most important things you can do, because even if you're going head to head and you're in opposition on a piece of legislation, literally the next hour, the next committee meeting, you may be running a bill together. So I'd say, it's not all about government officials and legislators. It's also about your fellow lobbyists.
And I would like to give you a few minutes. I'll leave the floor open to you. You can talk either about yourself or about your company, whatever you like to say. It's all up to you.
Oh, I don't even know how to answer that. I guess I'll talk a little bit about the company. I'd have to brag on Speaker Brubaker. Serving in the legislature for 37 years, I told you, enjoyed all of my education, both undergrad and law school. But in that first year of working for Brew, I probably learned more than I did in 7 years of college and law school, just on like how government functions. So I have to brag on Brew. We call him the Oracle of Judge Street because he just has this knack for telling you how things are going to work and what's going to happen. And I would say probably 90% of his predictions when it comes to like the legislative process and how things are going to turn out come true. So I'd use my few minutes just to brag on Brew a little bit.
That's fantastic. Well, I don't have anything else to ask you questions. I think that was a really insightful dive into your career. I've never learned about this stuff about you. But thank you so much for joining me, Sarah. I really do appreciate your time. And hopefully we'll meet sometime soon again.
Yeah, hopefully in person when all this is over.
I
Thanks,
agree.
Deepak.
All right. Take care. Bye. Very cool and fun to hear Sarah's background. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to learn about the hardworking lobbying community. Please do write a comment or review about this podcast. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your family members.